You want to create an 80s synth pop track, but how? In this video, I'm going to be showing you all of the things you need to create pure 80s pop through my recording of Suburbia by the Pet Shop Boys. Whether you're brand new to Logic Pro or you've got all of the Spenny plugins, this video is for you. The Pet Shop Boys are known to have used some of the first electronic music workstations, or as we call them now, DAWs. And this is like the Fairlight CMI3 or the Emulator 2, which are just such classic 80s pop synths. And they do drums, bass, synth, everything. They do it all. And if you've got the Arturia V collection, if you're lucky enough to have that, all of these are already as plugins for you, so just follow along the steps and we'll go with it. But if you don't have that, I'm going to be showing you how to recreate it with Logic stock plugins. Drums. To get the Logic drums of the Emulator 2 that I've used in this track, I've found a Lin drum and I've pitched up the snare because we want our snare to sound like you're hitting a sheet of metal. And there's a couple of ways to do this through a high pass filter, saturation, EQ in it, and some gated reverb, which is super important. I've used a plate reverb and then I've timed it with a gate that's been sidechained to the snare, and it just opens up in time with everything. So it makes it sound absolutely huge. For the kick, you want it to sound as tight as possible. Get rid of all the low end that you think you need. You don't need it. And because we're going to be really overplaying with this sequencer and really filling in all the space with the rhythm, and to make that even thicker, I've added congas left and right to just really make that more complicated, make it seem more textured and stuff. Bass. The classic 80s synth bass is already on Logic as 80s pluck bass. This is great and you don't really need anything else. To tell you the truth, I have not even used the Arturia plugin for this. I've used a different one called Synth Master Player. It's on Plugin Boutique and it's about a fifth of the price. I think it's like £7 for like hundreds and hundreds of presets. I love it. I love this version of it. But if you want the Logic one to sound like you're hearing now, you just choose 80s pluck synth and you just peak 900 to get a little bit more of the sort of high-endy stab from the bass. Synths. This is what the whole thing is about. This is why people spend so much money on emulations of exactly the same instrument, because they all do different stuff and some are emulated off the exact circuitry of it. I'm not going to tell you that Logic can immediately replicate these sky's the limit price plugins, but we can get there. We can figure out what steps are taken to achieve these sounds. My immediate gripe with Logic plugins is that they sound too clean and they're too stereo and they sound too nice. So when we're emulating all of these 16-bit synths and stuff from computers from bygone eras, we don't want texture and depth and everything. So what I would suggest you do to get the synths that you're hearing here is go on retro synth, find a saw wave and a square wave, blend the two, then go to ES2, which is also a Logic plugin, and find vintage synth strings. Now blend these together. It's going to take a little bit of EQing, a little bit of magic, your own ear to mix them two, but as soon as they mix together, that's essentially what we're going to be going with. You know, sounds like this Fairlight synthesizer. If you need it to sound a little bit less clean, whack it through some sort of, the Logic tape delay works really well. Turn the delay all the way down. Just use, you know, the texture that's adding onto it just to make it sound a little bit stranger. Other than that preset that's been used throughout the whole song, we've got some synth horns and some honky tonk piano, which are all presets on Logic, so you know, use them instead. You don't need to use the Fairlight or the Emulator 2 plugins, but save your piano lines for the chorus if you're going to use it, because once you go up that high, there's no coming back down in terms of vibe, you know. Guitar! As your synths are really long and wide, they're really covering over that fast attack that we need on the drums to really carry the song. So to compensate for that, I've taken all of the synths in the verse and slightly panned them to one side, and I've got the guitars on one other side. And it doesn't really matter what the part is here, it just needs to be really fast and rhythmic, just so it compensates. It's essentially percussion, you know, we're not using it as a guitar line, it is percussion. To sort of add to that, I've added an octave pedal to the guitar so that you don't really even consciously are listening to it. Vocals. Now we're on to the last one. Unlike a lot of pop genres, the Pet Shop Boys don't use that many vocals in comparison to other things. I've got one main vocal. Behind that, I've got 3 backing vocals that have all been bounced down into one track because I don't want to do anything fancy with them. And then I've got a really quiet harmony for the choruses. To get that spaced out but defined vibe to it, I have added a slapback delay on a tape emulator, and then I have added that to a quaver delay, which really adds a tight space and then a long space, which sort of creates that immersion of this person is far away, yet I can hear exactly what they're saying. I've also sent this vocal to a bus for parallel compression, just to get rid of any unwanted dynamics in it. You know, we're talking 80s synth pop here, there's not much that's natural in this. Most of the instruments are just from a computer, so we're not looking for acoustic sounds in our ears. Make sure you're careful when you're EQing your parallel compression, because you don't want any phase issues, and that is #1 thing that you do to get phase issues in your track. Mixing tips. I have 3 mixing tips for you. The first one is, before you EQ, pan. Make sure you use all the space. In this track, there's some really hard panning involved, just because that's what you could do on the computer at the time. These things, if they were all down the middle, would sound nowhere near as good, but the fact that they're panned, use the space. Number 2, don't use as much low end as you think you need. It's really easy to get caught in the trap of creating all this old vintage genre and stuff and go, oh yes, low end, we need that, we need that. But if you actually listen to these tracks, it's not as much as you think. And my final tip is it reverb or is it just a well-timed delay? Think about it. If you followed all of those steps, here's what it'll sound like.
It's on the front page of the papers, this is the hour of need. Where's a policeman when you need one to blame the colour TV?